So we started with an overview in our first session where we talked about the transition process, some of the benefits that you can look forward to. And in the second of the series of talks, we actually talked about this idea of virtual data warehousing. So you have built your reporting solutions, perhaps using export to data lake. JJ gave a great demo of how you can actually very easily switch almost to the same shapes, the same data warehouse populated with Synapse Link for Dataverse. Now today, we're going to go a little deeper and talk about how the data from export to data lake or from Dynamics is ingested into your own data warehouse. Because we know you've built complicated pipelines to ingest this data, perhaps into your data warehouse or maybe on premise. So we will deep dive on that topic today. Now, don't miss the next episode, which is coming next week, which is essentially to explore lake houses, like the new generation of insight solutions that's especially becoming available with Microsoft Fabric. So that's next week. And we're going to focus on incremental data ingestion today. So here's our agenda. A quick recap from previous episodes. If you've been attending this whole series, this might be a little bit of a refresher for you. But let's just get started on what we're going to do, what's our mandate, what's our mission, and then let's deep dive into transition architecture patterns, just as a refresher again, and Steve will walk us through that. And then we will jump right into the incremental data ingestion topic with JJ giving a very detailed demo. So with that, let's get started. You may have heard of this term called Synapse Link. Let's understand what this transition is. If you're using export to data lake or if you're using a previous generation product, let's understand the transition, some benefits, and let's also let's take a quick look at the roadmap. Right. So many of our customers are using these services today. If you're mostly from an F&O background, you might be using export to data lake feature, which essentially takes data from F&O, finance and operations, and exports that data into your storage account. Now you must be using Synapse, you might be using other tools, and also you might be using Power BI reports built on that. If you're a dynamic CE customer that's using sales, service, marketing, something like that, you might be using this service built into Synapse Link for Dataverse. So today, you have two identical services, essentially that does more or less the same thing. What we're doing now is essentially as a step in the unification of Dynamics products. You're probably familiar with this effort. We've been in this journey for some time. Now at the next step in this journey is we've unified all the different pipelines that we have across all these different products into Synapse Link for Dataverse. So Synapse Link for Dataverse is the one pipeline that takes data from all Dynamics, takes it to your storage account, so that you can work with Synapse and Power BI. Now, this is an upgrade. This is a step in our evolution. It will actually put you in good shape. It will actually make it really easy for you to benefit from the new innovations that are coming next. So for an example, you may have heard of Microsoft Fabric, which became generally available yesterday, which actually combined Synapse Analytics, Power BI, and many other services into a single SaaS service. So by upgrading to Synapse Link today, you have the advantage, or you'll get the benefit of using Microsoft Fabric later when you try to do that. So what does that transition look like? So today, on the leftmost side, you might be using data export service, you might be using bring your own database, you might be using export to data lake. Essentially, when you upgrade to Synapse Link, you can look forward to a whole lot of benefits. We discussed a lot in our first session, essentially simplicity, cost reduction, which will reduce your total cost of ownership. So you get the benefits of new technology, some of the new improvements, it will reduce your cost without actually making changes to the shape of the data. So your existing pipelines, the reports that you build should not require major changes. And that's the whole, that's what we want to show you. And as we discussed later on, you can enable new scenarios like enabling low-code insights and action when you start looking at Fabric. So Fabric session is next week. These 2 weeks, we've been focusing mostly on the upgrade step. So with that picture, with that roadmap in mind, I will hand you over to Stephen, who will walk you through some of these patterns. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Melinda. So we will quickly discuss what we've looked at previously and what we're going to focus on today. So in the previous session, we looked at the pattern around using a virtual data warehouse. So if that is of interest to you and you haven't already seen it, highly recommend going back and reviewing the Tech Talk on previous Tech Talk. Today, the patterns that we're going to focus on are numbers 3 and 4, cloud data warehousing and integrating with via TSQL or TSQL using for third-party apps. So when you want to take your data from the data lake and move it to another system of some description, such as Azure SQL database. But before we get into looking at those, let's take a moment to look at where we're coming from. So what customers and partners are using today when they're leveraging export to data lake. So with export to data lake, once the data has been shifted to your data lake, one of the key components that our customers and partners are familiar with is that of the CDM util. And this util is used to help build and define the database schema within Synapse serverless so that it can then be consumed more easily downstream. And from Synapse serverless, there's a pipeline where you create pipelines in order to shift that data as required, and whether that goes to Azure SQL or a Synapse dedicated pool or somewhere else, a pipeline can be created in order to help that incremental copy of data. Now, looking at the new world with Synapse Link, you'll notice one of the key differences is that there is no longer a CDM util. That capability of defining the schema is already baked into the tool. So now our customers and partners can focus their time and efforts on building the pipeline to copy the data to the areas where they want to consume it. And with that in mind, I will hand over back to JJ so that he can start focusing on looking at that particular process. Over to you, JJ.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So what we are going to demo is we already have a sample pipeline, which we are going to publish on the GitHub as well to show this exactly in actions, how you can copy the data from incremental folders to Synapse Link. So just to go on the step-by-step incremental data ingestion. So one of the prerequisite you have is, you set up the Synapse Link for Finance and Operations app. There is a detailed documentation on that. And then you configure the incremental folder update features in the Synapse Link. And I'll walk you through that as well, that experience. And then what we are going to do is to show a sample pipeline, which will be able to copy the data from Synapse serverless to Azure SQL database or on-prem database or even Synapse dedicated pool. So that's the kind of a logic we are fundamentally we are going to demo today. So with that, let me start the demo. The first thing I want to show here is the experience of setting the Synapse Link. So I'm here in the make.powerplatform.com. Some of these fundamentals we have covered in the beginning, but I'd like to show that how you can set up a Synapse Link profile, using the make.powerplatform.com. So in this, what we are going to set up is a new Synapse Link with a new Synapse Link profile with the incremental folder. When I say incremental folder, and I'll talk about that, but in the incremental folder, all you need to provide is the source group and the storage account. You do not have to connect with the Synapse Analytical Workspace or select the Spark pool. So this is the important thing, because we are copying the data incrementally in a storage account, right? And as you can see here, there is a option to select your frequency, how frequently you are going to export data. By default is a 60 minutes, and I can reduce this to 15 minutes today. We are working on improving it even further. But you got the idea that you can select these incremental data. And here you can also select Dataverse tables and FNO entities as well as FNO tables. So all those things are available to you to select to incrementally exports to your data lake. Very similar to how the change feed feature used to work in the export to data lake. So I have already set up this and added few tables in this profile. It basically shows here incremental profile. If I go into the detail tab, you can see that it's incremental folders and file, because I don't have any Synapse information in here. If I go to data lake, this is what I see. So in the data lake, this is my storage account. By the way, there's another thing, like you can also go to data lake directly from here. Click on this link. If you're using export to data lake, there is always a question, where is my data lake, which is connected to which environment, so this Synapse link provide that direct linking of the data lake as well from the profile itself. So here you will notice that there is a container for Dataverse environment. In that container, I have these folders created. And this is a little different than how you see the data in the change feed, but concept is very similar and easier. And I want to focus a little bit time here. So I set up this Synapse link probably on 10/27, added cust group. So a folder got created with a timestamp, and I have the cust group data in here in the CSV format. And as the folder exports completed, I also have a model.json file which describes the schema of this cust table. Once the if I had added more tables, we'll see more table in that. As you can see, next I added cust tables and cells line. These the data is in here, right? The one fundamental difference here is I want to highlight is like the folder, like when you are in export to data lake scenario, when you are using the change feed, one thing you have to currently do is to switch between the table folder and change feed folder. So full export happen in the table folder, incremental feed happen in the change feed. This is much simplified in this model. Now we are exporting data in a simple format of the folder structure. So even when you add a new tables, the full export happen in the same patterns as this format. So if I add a new tables into the profile, you will notice that a new folders get created, and then it will start processing the data in full export in that. Once the full export finish, and if any changes are happening, then new changes will come into the same folder structure. So this simplifies any pipeline development or any logic which you have to deal with to integrate. And I'll show that in the demo as well, how it can be simplified, and that sample pipeline can be example for you to further use it for any other integrations which you need. So that's the kind of a fundamentals about how the change incremental folder works. So to summarize, incremental folder does not require you to bring Spark pool. It's incrementally exports CSV data in the data lake in a timestamp based folder structures. Metadata is provided in the model.json file, and data is there in the CSV file. So that's the key thing here, right? Now I'll go back to the scenario of integrating this data back to Azure SQLs or things like that. Though how we can do that. So here, what I have is if I follow my step-by-step instruction, what I'm going to do is fundamentally, let me share this screen here, and these scripts which I'm going to execute is a lot of them is already available into the GitHub. We'll update that, anything new presented here, so you can try it yourself. So the first thing I have here is a Synapse serverless workspace. What I'm going to do is on top of the incremental folder, I'm going to virtualize that data, using the Synapse serverless. And this is how probably many of you are doing today. You are using Synapse serverless with the CDM util to virtualize that data, and then using the pipeline to copy. The concept remains same, just the folder structures is changed. So this pipeline will basically migrate or upgrade that experience to new things. So as I have also showed this same steps in the last things about data virtualization, same scripts works. I have here, let me connect to a Synapse serverless database and then execute some of these scripts. So the first script is basically connecting to a Synapse serverless database, as you can see here I'm doing, and then creating a new database, and then changing to that database and creating some keys, right? So I'll run this script. I'm able to create the database, the new database, and create the credentials. The next step is going to, so I created this database, CSV2, and I have here the next script, which is going to, create the, hold on, not this script. This script is basically going to create some, script, stored procedures and functions on the Synapse serverless database. So I had to, again, change the connection and run this script. But idea is basically here is, we are creating these artifacts as a SQL, and we'll be able to, run these queries on these database, and then able to virtualize that, going forward. So this basically, you will notice that I'll go a little bit deep into these stored procedures to explain exactly what it's doing. But like, these are some set of stored procedures, which is going to help with the, pipeline to copy the data from source to target, right? Then I have a target database here, which is Azure SQL database, destination SQL. I'll run the same script, exact same script, which I executed on the source on the target side. So there are some set of stored procedures which are required on the source side on the Synapse serverlets. There are some set of stored procedures which are required on the target. You can decide to, split it out, but essentially, and also, like, if you look at the naming convention of it, it has been, very clearly mentioned, this is required on the source. There are some, required on the target. So you can split those if you want, but just from simplicity, these are not going to be used, on the serverless side and things like that. So the scripts is very standard. Okay, so once I do this, run these steps, then I can go back to, my pipeline. So this is a simple pipeline, which I have, which we have published on the GitHub. As well as, we'll try to focus on this today to show what this pipeline is doing. So as you can see, so the pipeline has some parameters, and I'll explain those a little bit here so that it's clear. We'll have detailed documentation on the GitHub to explain this pipeline and how it can work, and share the details there as well. So what this pipeline is doing is there is a source database servers and source database name. I have a target database, right? I have a target database, which is Azure SQL in this case. And I have my folder, storage account where this is going to be there. So what the target schema where I want to copy this data to, and the source schema is like in the source database, which is we are virtualizing, what schema these objects will be created. And I will do the incremental CSV through, because this is incremental CSV folder, and also add export to data lake audit columns. So if you have seen last demo, this scripts can also add additional audit columns. So there are some differences in the audit column, like last date, modified date, time, and things like that in export to data lake and Synapse link. So what this script also does is, bridge those gaps. So it's add those additional columns. So if you have any dependency on those sort of columns, it can continue to work your downstream, and you don't have to change anything, right? So this is from the parameter side. And then the first step in this pipeline is doing is basically creating and updating source metadata, right? Source metadata is, so it's calling a script, as you can see here. If I go and edit this, it's calling a script. So it's basically calling the stored procedures which we have just created in the source and target database, right? So it's a very simple, it's exact similar things what we have demoed in the last things, creating data virtualization layer, but it's just calling it from the pipeline. So you can think of this as doing a CDM util type of thing, So it's reading the CDM metadata, which is there in the data lake, and then creating all those views on the source. Once the source views are created, and you can imagine every time this pipeline runs, if there are new tables in your data lake, if you have added new tables or new columns has come in, this is going to update those views. So your Synapse serverless views are already up to date and everything. You don't have to manage any of those things. So that's the first step. The second step is source get metadata, right? So now all the views are created. Now it's the next is calling another script to get the get SQL metadata, right? So now we have the metadata, like the column names and everything from the source in the views. Now it's going and querying the SQL metadata from that, and then there is this next script runs which runs on target, and you name of this is get set SQL metadata. So what this again call is a store procedures, which basically pass parameters and call store procedures to get list of the metadata. What actually, and I'll show you in this, what this step is done is take the source metadata, pass it to target create a control table and insert all that metadata in there, so that next set of processes can continue to kind of use that control tables to dictate how where the data is and all that kind of information. I'll show an example of that. The next part of the script is new data to copy. So it's not only doing that every time you run this pipeline, every tables has to be scanned, and changes has to be integrated in Azure SQL. So what is as you remember, I talked about folder structure here, right? So data is kind of maintained in the folder structure. The new data always comes with the newest timestamp folder. So we can intelligently go and say that, hey, what new tables has changed since the last time, right? This pipeline executed, what new folders got created, and only has to worry about processing those tables, right? So if I have 300 tables added to this incremental profile, and only 5 tables are changing frequently, I can reduce this for loop by just knowing that what new tables has changed. And it's not only reducing the number of loop, but also reducing the data we are copying. We are incrementally copying the data, right? So we want to go just target the folders which are newly created, from the last time this pipeline was executed. So this is, steps to basically copy that new, identify those new tables, new change tables data at the source by getting the target informations as well. Hey, these are the tables we have added. These are the new things we have. And now let's go in a loop and copy this data. So now when we go in the loop, all it's doing is copying that data to from serverless. So this is source, and it's passing the select query, and then executing this query on the source and syncing to the target database, right? It has pre-copy scripts as well, which will basically create the create the target tables and all that things, and then and if the data, and remember, this data is incremental data. So when you are running this pipeline, they maybe need to deduplicate and merge that data to target. So that's this next procedures being called to copy the data to target. So let me try to attempt. I have executed this pipeline a few times, so I'm confident this will work. But let me just attempt it live. I just created a new database in the source DB, my source DB same, and just debug it here and see this in action. So this pipeline start, as you can see here, it's executing that, update source metadata, and in few seconds it will finish. It's basically creating that views on source database. And I want to focus on some of those things here. You'll notice that all the views, all the tables which I have, the views are created on top of this. So I can right click and query the data here, right? So this is this new database I created. It read the metadata, it created the view definitions on top of incremental folder. And I have selected the add export to data lake column. So it also kind of created some fake columns and values, relevant values for the columns. Like we don't have an SN column in Synapse Link, but like it's just creating a column. So if you have any dependencies, at least that get resolved, from the coding perspective. And there is, we rename this to version number. We have a new concept, version number. So version number is renamed to LSN. File name is there. Data. This is one of the interesting things, data lake modified date time. So many of the customers are using data lake modified date time, which existed in the export to data lake, to find the incremental data. However, if you think about this, go back to the folder structures which we have that very good folder structures which define the new data. So if I go so what I've done here is the script create the view, and that folder, data lake modified date time is the folder name. So, and you'll see the value of that, in a bit. But if you can see here, this is nothing but a file path, the folder first folder path, and it's renamed as a data lake modified date time. So essentially, what we are doing is, we are creating a column for the folder name as a timestamp folder, and this will give immense benefit when you are using the Synapse serverless, because if you're not familiar, there's a concept in the Synapse serverless called folder elimination. So if you provide a date time or something like that, and try to filter on this, Synapse serverless is going to just filter the folders and read the data, incremental data, which you have created. And this means like your data is actually going to be in a very simple, format, and the performance of the incremental ingestions is going to be much better, because now we are doing this thing, incrementally. So let me give you an example of some of the previous runs which I did, and show exactly how it works. So if I go here and look at this pipeline, as you can see here, the copy data table steps, copy table data is the steps where, we are passing the queries to copy the data. This is not probably the one. Let me do this one. So copy data script. Here you go. So if you notice here, there is this, query here. Select start from cell table where data lake modified date time between this timestamp and this timestamp, and version number is more than this. What is instructing Synapse serverless to use that folder column to filter the data between these date ranges, and anything's version number 1. And this query is generated dynamically using the control table, and I'll show the control tables in a bit. But essentially what it's eliminating, it's eventually eliminating a lot of folders and only focusing on the new folders which has dropped here. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize that, because this is a true incremental ingestion of the data. You're not, so Synapse serverless will perform, your data integrations to target is going to be less and less. And also think about, many times you have to deal with the full export kind of scenarios, which was a big problem for customers who are using export to data lake. Many customers has to reinitialize all the data because full export happened. Now the full export happened, it's going to come in the new folders, and your pipeline will just pick up that new data. And you might have noticed that there is a row version number check as well in that. The pipeline can even eliminate the versions which I have already processed. The version number is a new incremental number, so it can technically ignore the data which hasn't changed and only ingest the incremental data. So that's a kind of a fundamental concept here. I'll go back to the SQL Server and show some of these things here. So I'll go here in the SQL Server and we'll show some concept here which talks about how this is happening at the target side. So far what we have seen is the source side. Now, if we look at the target side, when I executed my script, the setup script basically created those bunch of stored procedures which we created, and when this pipeline start executing, you'll see some control table and log table, right? So the control table here is the key here, how incrementally the data get ingested. If you look at the control table, it has, and this is all dynamic. It's all dynamically populated by the pipeline. So you don't have to start creating any of those things manually, but like it's already populated based on the pipeline. All the tables which I have, it's populated the time. It also has the, what columns we are using for the marker, where the data is stored. And there are many columns here, which basically dictate start date, time, like when the last data was last copied. The key thing in here is the last date time marker and last big int marker. Last big int marker is the version number, right? So what this is doing is basically making sure that we have those marker folders for every tables where the data has, what data has been processed so far and what is the version number it has processed so far. Now, using these two concepts, I can always go to serverless and ask for incremental data to give me anything after this date time stamp or this last big marker, right? And then it will process. There are a few other things in this. If you have used a pipeline which we have published on the GitHub for a dedicated pool copy or SQL copy, it's a similar concept. The same concept is just modified to utilize that new folder structures, new method like the model.json files, as well as the advantage of having the version number, which basically always increasing integer number. So I can just focus on that for every row and get this data, right? So now if you notice here, I think this is target database. Let me make sure that this is it's an Azure SQL target database. I can go and right click, and once the data got ingested, I can go and right click and select this data, right? The script also does create indexes even. So first time data got created, it's created index on the ID and version number, and I also throw in rec ID because that's unique for FNO. So it's creating the indexes as well, so that next time onward your data is optimal for copying purposes. And if you want to add more additional indexes, you can always do that if you are doing that already. So the idea is like now the data get copied into the Azure SQLs in the similar shape and format as it was with the export to data lake. So anything you have built out on top of it, your ETL pipeline, your stored procedures, your functionalities, and including Power BI report, that doesn't change because you have the exact same shape of the data, what you were getting with the export to data lake, and then you can continue to do that. Just the ingestion got changed, and you have this pipeline which is much more efficient and always work incremental, to sync the data. So that's the key thing. Now, let me switch gear a little bit on the dedicated pool side. If you're using dedicated pool, the same concept, same pipeline, exact same pipeline works. All you need to change, so due to some syntax differences, in the dedicated pool versus the Azure SQLs and things like that, you have a target pipeline which target steps which would be little bit different, but we have that scripts as well. The target scripts are, I think this is the one. So it's a bunch of stored procedures which are just made for the Synapse dedicated pool. If you're using undedicated pool, you may notice that, there are a lot of syntax differences. You have to create tables with heap, distributions, and all those things. And it's, so all that things is managed here. So this script is target scripts on the dedicated pool side. And if I already have a dedicated pool here, and I have already ingested, using the exact same pipeline. So you see the same control tables, same columns, everything in the dedicated pool using the same pipeline. And the concept is exactly same how you are ingesting that data in Azure SQLs or in dedicated pool. So same control tables, same columns. In fact, I can run the same pipeline with two different set of parameters to serverless as well as to Azure SQL as well as dedicated pool. I don't know if you have that scenario, but that's also possible. Exact same concept, right? So the customer group got ingested here. The data got ingested in the cust table, cust group, and this is all incremental, by the way. I mean, there is no need to just do full copy. And the concept here is any new data comes, is going to come into the new tables. And then once the data, incremental data is ingested in this new table, the deduplications will happen and then merge will happen into the target table. So you're not, losing, any scripts running afterwards is not impacted as well. So this is the dedicated pool. Now, how about SQL Server on-prem, right? Many of the customers has this scenario that, hey, my data warehouses still exist on-prem SQL Server. And I don't have time and energy to migrate everything to cloud. It's a big effort, and our teams are not ready. Like there are integrations with many other on-prem systems. Those tools are not ready, and that's a reality. We have seen over and over. Customers moving to Dynamics has always big advantage of moving their data warehouse solutions to cloud using Synapse and Fabric, but sometimes the starting point is Azure SQL on-prem or SQL Server on-prem, right? The same pipeline can work with SQL Server on-prem version. All you need to do is have this. You might be familiar that the Synapse pipeline provide a integration runtime. So you can have integration runtime connecting the ADF pipelines to on-prem, and then have this configured on your endpoints. So anyone who is familiar with the Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipeline would know that I will select this on-prem runtime. I'll select the identity. I will probably use, the Windows authentications and things like that, to connect to my on-prem database. But essentially the same pipeline, same concept can work, right? And here is another thing I wanted to throw out. Synapse Azure SQL Server 2022, which is the on-prem version. I have created, SQL Server 2022 support data virtualization, exactly like how the Synapse serverless does. So SQL Server 2022, which has been GA in 2022, so it's been a year, support poly-based data virtualization. So you can, what it means is it can read data directly from the data lake. So the virtualization concept, which I did in the Synapse serverless, can be actually done in the Azure SQL, SQL Server on-prem 2022. This is only supported on 2022 onboard. So just remember that. So here, as you can see, I'm connected to my local, database, which is SQL Server 2022. And I have created these data virtualizations layer on top of it using the exact same script. So there is no change in the script. The script which we have for data virtualizations work on both serverless and Azure SQL Server 2022, as well as Azure SQL MI, Managed Instance, Hyperscale, all those versions, right? And you would notice that, I was able to query that data from this on-prem directly to servers, right? And you can see the same syntax here in the Azure SQL Server 2022. I'm able to create this source database. And if I want to copy this data, but remember, this is data virtualizations. This will not give you the if you are looking for the indexes and all those kind of functionality, you probably have to copy this data to the regular tables in the SQL DB. And then you can do that very easily, by just using that pipeline or writing that, source to target scripts in the SQL jobs. That's the kind of a key concept of data virtualization. So what we have seen so far, let me summarize it. What we have seen so far, if you are using export to data lake, you are doing incremental data ingestions to Azure SQL, Synapse dedicated pool, or on-prem SQL server. All of that can be done with the Synapse link as well. When you use incremental folder concept, the data is available in incremental fashion in the CSV files. Metadata is available. You can use this script and pipeline to copy that incremental data to any of these destinations. And by the way, the script, if you think about the concept a little bit, the script or pipeline is very generic enough from the concept point of view. So if you have another destinations, let's say, hey, my database destination is not a SQL server, but a dedicated pool, but, let's say, Oracle DB or some other DB, concept remains same. Fundamentally, it's using this, concept of T-SQL scripts, logic of T-SQL scripts to do these copy data. And like, if you think about this destinations on the sync side, Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipeline provide many destinations, right? There is tons of destinations, and these all destinations can be selected as a sync if you want to. There will be some, like those store procedures, which is basically doing the control table and things like that, has to be translated in that language instead of the SQL. But conceptually, you can have this data to any destinations with Synapse pipeline supports. So that was the demo. We do have this slide which compares the change feed and incremental folder. As we pointed out, that you have this change feed, there is a folder level differences, but this pipeline solves that problem. You don't have to worry about any of those kind of things. Just read that new folder password. And this folder, new folder, timestamp based folder, is much better because it's timestamp based, and we can utilize this in our pipeline to do incremental data ingestions in a true sense, right? So there are a lot of more detail in here. You can read about it. We also saw this thing when, incremental data ingestions demo. So the effort to transitions is really low. I mean, you just set up the incremental pipeline, you have this new pipeline, and then you basically start ingesting data through the new pipeline, and then your subsequent steps, which are after there, which is your secret sauce and recipe, all the ETL which you do on the Azure SQLs or SQL Server or dedicated pool remain as is, right? And what are the key value add to this, this format? You know that export to data lake, if you're using, whenever you do a full export, either it's done by a user by deactivating the tables or service because it's detected any failures or things like that, failovers, when you do database restore, or even in case of disaster recovery or any other failovers attempt happen on the database, we are using a technology in the export to data lake, which is CDC, change data capture, and that fall off, whenever failover happen and things like that. So the only recovery mechanism in the export to data lake is the full push, right? So with Synapse Link, the chances of full push of the data is very low because we are using the row version change tracking, which is the timestamp, kind of things on the row itself. And that data doesn't lose when we have, failover or disaster recovery or anything. It's available in your primary database in individual table. So there is no need for us to do a full push to recover. We will just start from where we left. And that's a big advantage for anyone doing the incremental data ingestions. And I want to emphasize on that. And the logic of the pipelines cover that nicely, that how it can go and, incrementally read that data or any new tables being added and things like that, right? And you saw that there's simpler logic to process full and incremental because the folders are coming into the same structures, no matter it's a full export, new tables, or incremental. That's exactly possible. So this was the key thing. One other things, I think I've not seen the questions, but there may be questions for some of you. I have heard and seen customers using Azure Data Factory or Synapse Pipeline data flow to copy the data using the CDM connectors. Remember that, the CDM, we are processing the data in the CDM format in incremental fashion as well. Model.json is a CDM format, right? So any other tools which used to work with the CDM format will continue to work. There's no change. There will be some formatting change maybe in that, but data flow works with this folder structures as well.
Thank you, JJ, for that exhaustive demo. I'm probably running out of breath now. So I think, the idea here is to guide you through the transition process. So I think there were a lot of great questions, and I think we've done our best to point you to the right episode. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of things that you can do. But I think, as you can see, our focus has been to help you upgrade faster. Because when you get to Synapse Link, a lot of things become easy. You can do even more. So, after you've had a chance to digest the episodes, I think the best thing is just give it a try. Get a test environment, try it out. It's not that hard. And links to these patterns, transition guidance is available in this GitHub link. I know a few of you asked for that link. Go ahead, it's here. A great way to have these questions, even after these sessions, ask questions from us, the product team, as well as your fellow community members. There are thousands of members in this community. I suggest you join if you want to stay in touch and ask all these great questions. So after that learning exercise, I think you should have a plan. You should have a plan to transition. So if you're exporting to Data Lake, you have time until November. We've announced our transition. We've announced the upgrade. Give it a try, create a plan. Now that plan may involve, it might be just, you want to just upgrade essays with minimum effort. That might be fine. Or in the process, you might want to take advantage of some of the new features. That's great too. So if you're using already, plan to transition. If you are planning to go live in the next couple of months, the next year or so, it might be good to actually adopt Synapse Link from the start. As we mentioned, it's not that hard to switch over. So why not start straight away with Synapse Link? And why so? That's because there's a lot of benefits that you can accrue from the transition. Simplifying reporting with Delta format. We talked a lot about it in the first 2 episodes. You can simplify your data integration. I think we talked about it in this episode. Of course, you can optimize your architecture even more And we'll talk about it in the next episode. So that's pretty much it. Again, JJ, I think there were a couple of questions specifically about delete in the chat. I think we provided answers. Maybe do you want to cover, I guess the crux of the question was, I think some of you were using the tables folder to identify deleted records, and some of you were using the incremental folder to identify deleted records. I think if you can touch on the subject of how do you detect deletes and go, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
So Synapse Link, does incremental folders, does support delete. So deleted rows will come as there is a column in the CSV files called isDelete. And that is populated as yes or no with the ID values. And the pipeline does exactly identify those deletes and delete those rows, in the target during the merge process. So deletes are handled much more gracefully and incremental fashions. You don't have to read the entire table folders to identify deletes. So incremental data which you're copying has the deleted rows as well, and they are flagged as isDelete. So you can easily the scripts can easily delete those rows from the target as it found. ID is the new key in any of these things, and the deleted rows will have the value of ID and isDelete true column. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I think I see one of the questions from Rizwan. In export to data lake, incremental folder would get wiped out. Yes, that's another advantage, right? I mean, we are not wiping out any folders in the incremental scenarios. If you deactivate and reactivate a tables or something happens, you may see new data coming again. But again, that new data or the full data will come into the same folder structure. And as you can see in this pipeline, we are not even going and deleting that. So the folders remain there. You can go back few days things. And if you have anything out of sync, you can reprocess that data. You can manage your own structure, like timeline, to clean up the change, the incremental folders. That way you have control of like how much previous data you want to preserve to process. So there is no concept of reacting to the events. If the full push happens, then you have to go and tap into the business event, because it's all kind of a streamlined. Like if the full export happen, first of all, chances of full export is much lower because of the technology we are using. Even if it happens, you have to deactivate and reactivate it handled gracefully because it comes in a new folder structure.
Absolutely. Thank you, JJ. I think there were a couple of questions about the medallion architecture and how you can leverage Fabric. I think we should do a shameless plug for our episode coming next week. Yep. So, folks, we have a session. The last of our tech talks is about cloud architectures, cloud data warehouses, the medallion architecture. We look forward to your session. We look forward to you joining our session next week. Now, I think the key thing to keep in mind is that when you do upgrade your existing export to data lake to Synapse Link, moving to Fabric becomes so much easier. It just becomes like a click of a button. You will see table definitions in Fabric, and you can work with all Fabric workloads. We'll show you. There's also this new feature that became generally available yesterday. It is called Link to Fabric. So Link to Fabric is this net new feature which enables power users to do more with Fabric data. So we'll talk more about this in detail, but at the same time, we will put some links to the docs. Anything more, JJ, about the upcoming episode?
Yeah, and upcoming episode is like the medallion structures, lakehouse architectures. Many of you are using the Synapse Spark and things like that, or Databricks to do the medallion architectures, lakehouse architectures. We'll touch upon that, how that transition works, how easy that would be. And then, we'll touch upon the Fabric, some of those things, how you can further optimize that, like if you're going into that directions, and some of the things which we are going to continue doing this. Like I think the Fabric